Welcome to a new episode of Economics Trends. Have you ever thought about what could happen if tensions between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea escalated into something catastrophic? Recent events in the region suggest that this could be a real possibility. The Philippines and China have a history of conflict in the South China Sea, with both nations laying claims to the same maritime space. China has extended its reach through its 9-dash line, a boundary that covers most of the sea. The Philippines, along with Malaysia, Brunei, and Vietnam, have ongoing disputes with China over the same territory. The Philippines took the fight to China when diplomatic talks failed, bringing the matter to the Hague-based Permanent Court of Arbitration. In 2016, the court ruled in favor of the Philippines, declaring that China had no legal basis for its claim. However, China has refused to acknowledge the verdict and continues to exert its power in the region, ignoring the sovereignty of other nations. In recent years, China has become more aggressive in the region, particularly towards the Philippines. The Chinese Coast Guard has reportedly threatened and intimidated Philippine vessels, while dozens of Chinese militia vehicles have been seen swarming around Philippine islands. In 2021, a Filipino Coast Guard vessel was hit by a military-grade laser, causing temporary blindness. These actions have been deemed dangerous operational behavior by the U.S. State Department, which has pledged to stand with the Philippines in the region. The United States is ready to defend its allies and protect freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, as guaranteed by international law. However, tensions in the region continue to rise, and there is a real fear that conflict could break out. This is not just a dispute over territory, it's about power, influence, and the future of the region. If China continues to ignore international law and infringe upon the sovereignty of other nations, the consequences could be devastating. So, what can be done to prevent this from happening? Diplomatic talks have failed in the past, and China has shown little regard for the international community's rulings. It's up to the global community to hold China accountable and work towards a peaceful resolution to the South China Sea disputes. The situation in the South China Sea is complex and fraught with tension. China's aggressive behavior towards the Philippines and other neighboring nations is a cause for concern. The international community must come together to address this issue and prevent a catastrophic war from breaking out in the region. Have you heard about the recent conflict between the Philippines and China? The Philippine Coast Guard was the target of a Chinese laser that was used to deter them from their destination. What's worse is that Chinese ships also made dangerous maneuvers against them. Clearly, these are all hostile actions. Let me give you some context. The Philippine ship was going to 2nd Thomas Shoal, which is about 105 nautical miles northwest of the Philippine province of Palawan in the disputed Spratly Islands. This particular shoal serves as home to a small group of Philippine soldiers living on board a rusting World II-era ship known as the Sierra Madre. The ship was deliberately grounded there in 1999 to underline the country's claim of sovereignty, and a contingent of troops now stays there. For the Chinese Navy to point lasers against a Philippine ship that is going to resupply its own troops is just plain interference in internal issues. It's no wonder why Teresita Daza, the foreign ministry spokesperson, said in a statement, "The Philippines have the prerogative to conduct legitimate activities within its exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. China does not have law enforcement rights or powers in and around the Yungan Shoal or any part of the Philippines." She went on to highlight the absurdity of that hostile action, especially in light of the January Maritime Peace meeting held between the two nations. She said, "These acts of aggression by China are disturbing and disappointing, as it closely follows the state visit to China of President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. in early January, during which he and President Xi Jinping agreed to manage maritime differences through diplomacy and dialogue without resorting to force or intimidation. This vocalization of concern is part of what the Philippines has decided to do in what seems like a new strategy meant to garner international support by exposing China. The Philippines Coast Guard, in particular, has launched a strategy of publicizing aggressive actions by China in the disputed South China Sea by publicizing its own side of the matter. It then counters Chinese propaganda by revealing the light of the matter. A Coast Guard Commodore said, "I'd like to emphasize that the best way to address Chinese gray zone activities in the West Philippine Sea is to expose it." The international community's reaction to the Philippines Coast Guard protest highlights the importance of transparency in international relations. The release of the video of the laser incident by the Philippines Coast Guard provided the world with evidence of China's provocative actions in the South China Sea. The incident raised concerns not only in the Philippines and the United States, but also in other countries, as it suggested a pattern of Chinese aggression and territorial expansion in the region. The condemnation of China's actions by other countries demonstrates the growing recognition of the need to hold China accountable for its behavior in the South China Sea. This increased attention on the issue has put pressure on China to act responsibly and engage in constructive dialogue with its neighbors to resolve the territorial disputes in the region. The Philippines' move towards greater transparency in its relations with China may have far-reaching implications for the future of the South China Sea, as other countries may follow its example and seek to hold China accountable for its actions in the region. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has been keen on addressing the long-seething territorial disputes in the South China Sea. His efforts to defend the Philippine territories have been reflected in the recent actions of summoning China's ambassador to Manila. In his statement, he emphasized the shift in the Philippine military's focus from internal threats to external defense. This change in direction is not just a mere political move, but a genuine attempt to protect their sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Philippines' determination to stand up to China has not only been limited to words. The government has also taken concrete steps to bolster its defense capabilities by strengthening its military ties with the United States. This has been reflected in their plans to hold joint sea patrols, which not only demonstrate their commitment to security in the region, but also symbolize their willingness to collaborate with other nations to counter Chinese aggression. It is worth noting that this shift in the Philippines' national direction is not without its risks. With the United States at their side, they have become a more formidable opponent for China. This, in turn, has increased the likelihood of tensions escalating further in the region. Nevertheless, the Philippines' leadership has recognized the importance of safeguarding their nation's interests and has made it clear that they will not back down in the face of Chinese aggression. As with any matter, there are two sides to be heard. Beijing was forced to release a statement in light of the public outcry, which they did. When asked to explain their position, Chinese officials said that the Philippine patrol vessel trespassed into Chinese territory. This meant that they still adamantly view this area as being theirs. They went on to say that the Chinese Coast Guard acted professionally.